Hello, and welcome to Western Washington History. Located up near the Canadian border and 88 miles from Seattle, Bellingham is Washington's most northern city. Let's dig into its history. Captain George Vancouver sailed through the area in 1792. He named many of the places with the names we know today. Of course, the native population that was here at the time had names for these areas also. Many of those names were kept in some crude translation. The Lumi people were the native people of the area. In 1855, the Point Elliott Treaty moved them to the 15,000-acre Lumi Reservation on the Lumi Peninsula, where many native people live today. Bellingham, as you could guess, was not one of those native words. Captain Vancouver named the bay Bellingham Bay after Sir William Bellingham. Bellingham is located in Whatcom County. The name is from Whatcom Falls. The natives had a similar word for it, meaning noisy water. Captain Henry Roeder and Russell Peabody set up a lumber mill where the Whatcom Creek empties into the bay in 1852. They were told about this location while in Olympia by a Lumi native. Henry Hewitt and William Brown were employees of the mill when they found seams of coal in the ground south of Whatcom Creek. So along with their boss, Henry Roeder, they sold the land to some San Francisco investors who in 1854 created the Bellingham Bay Coal Company. They called their mine the Sehome Mine. It was located where present-day Laurel Street is. The community that built up around it was soon called Sehome, which was the name of a local Samish tribe member. Daniel Harris came to the area in 1853 or 1854. He befriended John Thomas, who had filed a land claim on Padden Creek. John was improving his homestead when he met Daniel. Daniel helped him get a cabin started. Before the cabin was finished, John died, leaving Dan to finish the work, and he got ownership of the homestead in 1871. Daniel Harris picked up more land and started a community and named it after a native word that meant safe harbor, or Fairhaven as he called it. With native attacks on the rise in the whole region, the U.S. Army built Fort Bellingham in 1856. Overseeing construction was U.S. Army Captain George E. Pickett and Company D of the 9th U.S. Infantry from Fort Steilacoom. Captain Pickett went on to become a major general in the Confederate Army. He led what was one of the bloodier battles called Pickett's Charge on the third day of the Battle of Gettysburg during the Civil War. Fort Bellingham was built on a spring near the bay in an open field. They had to relocate a husband and wife to the beach who were already living there. In 1858, a milestone for Washington. The first brick building, the T.G. Richards and Company store, was built. In 1884, it became the Washington Territorial Courthouse. It still stands today at 1308 E Street. The Fraser Canyon Gold Rush started in 1858. It caused the little town of Whatcom to explode in population because it was at the beginning of what was called the Whatcom Trail. The trail led into Canada and to the Fraser River where the gold was. From Whatcom, many ships came and went during this time. There are two different stories. That was one of them. The other one is that there were ships waiting in the harbor, which caused the town to increase in size. They were waiting for the trail to be finished to the gold mine. Either way, Governor James Douglas, who oversaw British interests in the British-owned areas, had forbid the Whatcom Trail as entry and said that only those coming in through Fort Victoria, British Columbia were allowed. There were thousands using the Whatcom Trail, way too many to enforce his rule. That is one version of the story. The other one is by the time they got the trail cleared, either the gold had run dry or Governor Douglas had put permit requirements on everyone at the mines showing port of entry. Either way, he did do the permits, and the population dropped back down to pre-gold levels. The army from Fort Bellingham got involved with the British during what was called the Pig War in 1859. Parts of the fort were taken to San Juan Islands and converted to a fort there called Camp Pickett, and later called Post of San Juan. Darius Ogden Mills bought the Bellingham Bay Mining Company in 1866. Now it was part of Black Diamond Coal Mining Company. At this point, the Sehome mine had 100 people working in it. Mrs. Maria Roberts, the wife who originally lived where Fort Bellingham was built, was given back 320 acres in 1868. The fort had been abandoned in 1863. The land had been called Lumi before and now was changed to Marietta to honor her and her husband for their hardship. She now lived in the house Captain George E. Pickett and his native wife had lived in, called the Officer's House, which remained and still remains at 910 Bancroft Street. Fire destroyed Roeder and Peabody's Whatcom Mill in 1873. In 1878, Black Diamond Coal Mining Company closes the Sehome mine and begins to sell off portions of its land holding. Roeder and Peabody's heirs give the mill site to a collective group from Kansas in 1881 in exchange for them rebuilding the mill, building a church, 50 houses, a wharf, and a school. They called it the Washington Colony. To create needed money, they sold off stock. One man who bought some was J.H. Stinger. He ended up owner of the old mill. With misplaced anger, two members made a bomb out of a 5-gallon can, some gunpowder, and who knows what else. It worked because it blew up Stinger's house. In 1883, Daniel Harris had the lots drawn up and platted Fairhaven. He set out selling lots and advertising his community. In 1885, he got married. Also in 1885, the Washington Colony disbands. They never grew over 25 families. Daniel Harris sells his Fairhaven property in 1888 to Nelson Bennett and leaves with his wife for California. In 1889, the Bellingham Bay Improvement Company was formed. It was a group of California businessmen who dreamed that one day Bellingham would be what Seattle had become. They invested in coal, shipping, railroad construction, utilities, and real estate. They created the first electricity for the area. Mostly it was used for streetcars and street lighting. In 1890, the Fairhaven Land Company bought one of their neighbors, a little place in between Sehome and Fairhaven called Bellingham. Now they had a post office. Nelson Bennett took over operations in Fairhaven on his own until 1890, when his financial partner Charles Larrabee comes to town. They set to promote the town and hope to see it become a big city. In 1 year's time, from 1889 to 1890, the population grew from 150 people to over 8,000 people. I guess the work was paying off. At this point, in 1890, there were 4 towns. Sehome, which is now downtown Bellingham, Whatcom, which is the Old Town District, Fairhaven, which is Bellingham's Fairhaven neighborhood, and Bellingham, the area near Boulevard Park. The first high school in the entire Northwest was built in 1890 in Sehome. 33 students attended the first year. Another coal mine opened in 1891, Blue Canyon Mine. It was located at the south end of Lake Whatcom. Its biggest customer was the United States Pacific Battleship Fleet. Whatcom and Sehome merged into New Whatcom in 1891. Some people in Sehome were concerned that the bigger Whatcom would take their identity. New Whatcom City Hall was built in 1892. There was a depression at the time, so parts of the interior as well as the clock was not finished until later. This building still stands at 121 Prospect Street. It is now the Whatcom Museum of History and Art. After drilling a borehole and setting off some dynamite to blast out more ore, 7 miners in the Blue Canyon mine were killed in a methane explosion in 1895. Hearing the explosion while working on the next floor up, 18 miners ran to the exit of the mine. When they got near the vertical shaft, the gases and smoke had little oxygen left. 16 of these miners suffocated. Only 2 were able to get out alive. The inspector said if they had stayed where they were, they may have made it out, but they ran to the area that had no oxygen. The company erected a memorial to those fallen workers. It's located at the Bayview Cemetery. Roland Onfroy started a salmon cannery named North Pacific Packing Company in 1898 at 5th and Harris in Fairhaven. He also bought Wright Brothers Fishing Company that same year. By the next year, he sold the business to Frank and E.B. Deming, who also bought Northern Fisheries in Anacortes and combined both into Pacific American Fisheries Company. They built a new cannery on Elza Island, but lacked fresh water, so they returned to the mainland, and the island location was turned into a shipyard. The new Whatcom Normal School opened in 1899 on top of Sehome Hill. This was the 3rd normal school in the state. For those who don't know, a normal school was a school for training school teachers, like a college just for teachers. The students, mostly women, would stay at the school for a year to become an elementary school teacher. In 1903, Fairhaven got a grant from the Carnegie Foundation for a library. It was built at 1117 12th Street. It was a beautiful building, and it still is. It is operating as a library to this day. 1903 brought a new Washington state law. Now towns were not allowed to have the word new in front of them. New Whatcom was forced to drop the new. Bellingham Bay Improvement Company realized in 1903 that the small generator powering the area was not creating enough electricity for the growing area. So they set out to build a hydroelectric plant on the North Fork of the Nooksack River below Nooksack Falls. They didn't finish the project, and in 1905 they sold everything to Stone and Webster. October of 1903, they had a vote in Fairhaven and Whatcom to see if they should consolidate. Vote was yes. They had picked the name Bellingham, and this would not be a town like the 4 had previously been. This was a city, and at that point, the 4th largest city in Washington. Following the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, the hills around Bellingham were alive with logging, and more mills were built to turn the wood into lumber to ship to San Francisco. The first downtown Bellingham library opened in 1908. Bellingham was one of 2 cities in the United States to win 2 Carnegie Foundation library grants. Five-story Bellingham National Bank was opened in 1913 at a cost of $425,000 for the land and building. In today's money, that would be roughly $13 million. It may look like an old building now, but at the time it was the example of Bellingham heading into the modern age. Many of the now older buildings, like the old City Hall, were built in the late 1800s by people trying to impress the two big railroads in hopes that they would come through the area. The bank was breaking out of that design and looking to the future. I like both styles personally. I like both styles. This bank can be seen today at 101 East Hawley. Not only did it look modern, it was modern. Each of its 124 rooms had central vacuum hookups and hot and cold water. The building also had a mail chute and 2 high-speed elevators at a time when other buildings had none or just one slow one. This was the largest building in Bellingham for 13 years until the Bellingham Herald building was completed in 1926. In 1917, the Blue Canyon mine closed. During its run, it had hauled out over 250,000 tons of coal. The Bellingham coal mine opened the same year at Northwest Avenue and Birchwood Avenue. The mine grew to hundreds of miles of tunnels underground, and what the Blue Canyon mine had pulled out of the earth in its lifetime, this mine was eventually able to do each year. It closed down in 1955. By 1937, the normal school changed its name to Western Washington College of Education. It was the third college in the state. In 1961, it changed again to Western Washington State College, and in 1971 it became Western Washington University, which is what it is today. The downtown library was moved in 1951 to 210 Central Avenue, and the old building was demolished and the hill it sat on regraded. Of course, this is really just a sample of the history of Bellingham. Really just a beginning or a jumping off point for more videos about this great city to come in the future. If you like the video, you know what to do. If you appreciate the hard work that goes into this, feel free to show support by becoming a member of this channel. Also, for a more hands-on history experience, go see your local museums and historical societies. Tell them Western Washington History sent you. Whatever you do, just remember, what you do today will be history tomorrow. So make it count.